Alright guys, welcome to the weekly recap of the 25th through the 30th of September, and we'll speak a little bit about what we want to see going into the next week. So let's get right into the dollar index. As we spoke on last week, we have the breaker block here, and we've had a solid up week last week. Still gravitating to this imbalance here. We want to see that get tagged in the next couple weeks. 1 to 2 week time horizon for that. We took out buy side liquidity here. And let's go into the daily chart. If you have not seen the market review from last week, I suggest you go and watch that. That will help you get up to speed on what we're talking about here. The most ideal location to find some up movement is this buy side imbalance. This would be the most this is what catches my eye the most. We have a small order block here and that imbalance. We came down into that on Friday. Ideally, we would want to see this open up and stay above half of this wick. If we can stay above half of that wick, we shouldn't really need to come back down into this imbalance, and it should start just keep chugging along up into the weekly levels that we just spoke about. Let's get into US 500. And if you watched the recap and review from last week, you will be pleased to see that we have hit the buy side imbalance that we spoke about. That was our target for the last week. Let's go into the daily. Taking its sweet time. Let me reload this page. Let me reload. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, US 500. Okay, back into the daily chart. We come up into this daily order block, and we did not tag into that daily sell side imbalance. Really, we don't want to see this get tagged. If it does, it's okay, but ideally, if we're going to remain heavy, this should stay open. And the reason for that is if this stays open, and as you'll see in a moment, the NASDAQ has actually hit this respective imbalance. So what that's telling me is if this is left open and the NASDAQ has already hit its imbalance on the daily, it's telling us that the US 500 is more weak, and we could probably see a stronger sell-off coming into the next week. Let's go into the 4-hour. We hit our level on the weekly level here on Wednesday, gave us a Wednesday low of week, and retraced all the way back into the new week opening gap. If you remember from the last stream, these new week opening gap levels are important, and you should at least keep about 5 of them on your chart at all times. I have every new week opening gap from the past 60 days. They're very interesting and provide fair value gap. They're not fair value gaps, but they provide fair value for institutional traders. So we hit our retracement back into the new week opening gap, and this imbalance here on the 4-hour, this does pique my interest. So if we can come up into that and then roll over going into the later parts of the next week, that is what would be ideal. Let's go to NASDAQ. NASDAQ has been a little bit slower in reaching our weekly level, while the US 500 hit its respective imbalance. The NASDAQ actually only took out some that sell side liquidity we were looking for, this level here. It'll pop up on my chart. That level right down here seems like TradingView is having some issues right now. So let's get into the daily. I don't know if it's just my end or if it's TradingView's having the problems here, but give us a little bit of lag. Trying to reload that. Of course, TradingView has to give problems whenever we get this stream going. You know how it is. US 100. Okay. Daily chart. This is what I was talking about when we were talking over the US 500 chart. this respective sell-side imbalance, the Nasdaq actually went ahead and traded all the way back up into that. So if the US 100 doesn't come back into that, it's going to show us that in terms of relative strength, that the US 500 is actually the weaker pair, if that makes sense. So like we just covered, when US 500 hit the weekly level, US 100 just took sell-side liquidity. It did not actually hit our target. And then on the 4 hour, we can go ahead and go to the 4 hour. We put in that weekly low on Wednesday and retraced into the new week opening gap and that daily sell-side imbalance, while also taking out a level of buy-side liquidity here. Now, the Nasdaq doesn't actually have any fair value gap here, but ideally ideally going into the next week, we should remain heavy, and this level here, it's a daily order block, not daily, a 4 hour order block. If we can come back up into that maybe Monday or Tuesday and then roll over, that's the ideal scenario to see 14K. Let's go into the euro. Euro weekly chart. We remained heavy on the last week and took out the sell-side liquidity and came into this redelivered rebalance. Not much to speak on the weekly there. Let's go into the daily. I guess I can just edit out all these parts where it's gone slow here. I really don't know if it's my connection or just TradingView. It's pretty interesting. Alright, about time. Euro. You can do it, buddy. Come on, the internet. I've got 20% battery on this computer, so we got a time crunch here. Let's go into the daily chart on the euro. Okay. So the first thing that pops off to me is this daily sell-side imbalance, of course. So, as we're outlining on the indexes, if we can remain heavy going into the next week, that is ideal, as we are still bearish, and we're going to be bearish until the dollar index hits that weekly level. So that will give us a little insight on the assets that we actually trade, which for me is the indexes, but for the guys that trade Forex, this level, it's going to be basically what is going to tell us if the euro remains heavy or if we're going to come up and take out a little bit of buy-side liquidity. So that's the biggest level to watch on the euro, the daily chart. Let's go into the 4-hour. Got a nice rollover after we took out this liquidity here. Nice rollover here and a big imbalance here. So ideally we will remain heavy and go for that sell side. Let's go into the British pound. British pound also took out that liquidity, but that had already been taken out when we spoke last week. We hit this volume imbalance, and we want to see if price will remain heavy throughout this. My computer's dying. I'm gonna plug it in. Plug it in while this chart's swapping over. It's embarrassing how these computers don't really stay charged that long. British pound. Okay, so British pound daily chart. Let's wait for these levels to populate. Okay, I didn't annotate this before, but there's a redelivered rebalance here on the daily. So, like all other assets, we got that into week retracement here. Ideally, it's going to remain heavy. I would watch for half of this wick to be respected and start targeting sell side here and into this daily order block. Nothing really speaks any interest into the 4-hour chart except this. There's an imbalance here, sell side imbalance, which, if you remember, we just spoke about on the daily chart. That's about half of the daily chart's wick. So that lines up pretty nicely. Let me go up one time frame. So see that the sell side imbalance here, the high of it actually only stopped about halfway of that wick on the daily. So that's what I'll be looking at for the British pound. If we flip this level, of course, we can start seeking buy side, but this imbalance here sparks my interest if we don't respect this level. I would think that it's going to start gravitating up here. Let's go to Bitcoin. Bitcoin weekly chart. If you remember, we've been talking about this monthly level for months now. Monthly breaker. And Bitcoin actually did not do as we expected. If that's a shock. So this weekly balance here is what sparks most of my interest, but I'm not going to mark that out because we have a daily level already marked out that we spoke about last week. Man, curse this internet. Alright. I'm going to cut out all this stuff when we get ready to upload it, so all this stuff is going to be cut out, don't worry. Okay, Bitcoin daily chart. This is the area, the balance price range that we wanted to see get respected. It's done it twice now. We've respected the level, but I'm not liking how it's come in here a third time. It may be seeking this liquidity first before we actually head back down to 24.8. Bitcoin can be a little finicky sometimes, so you gotta leave a little bit of room for it to color outside the lines, basically. And even smart money concepts, they don't always perform the best on Bitcoin. Let's go into 4-hour. These are the specific levels that we wanted to see get respected. And actually on Sunday, I called out this short here on Bitcoin, which netted only about 500 points, which is nothing to scoff at, but it did not turn out how we expected it. Come up and tag that sell side imbalance. We spoke about the sell side imbalance on the actual market review, but in chat we took a short off of the breaker block. The breaker block clearly did not get respected, which is okay. It's Bitcoin. Sometimes these things happen. After we come and took out this buy side liquidity here and finally stabbed into that sell side imbalance, it really didn't give. It took out a small little liquidity here, but it didn't give any kind of sustainable runs. On the 4 hour, I will say that it does look a little heavy, but in my opinion, I just don't like how we haven't respected this balanced price range. We've come up and hit it the third time now. Like we said last week, if it goes over half of this balanced price range from the daily chart, it will be pretty problematic for the bears. So if you're bullish on Bitcoin, wait till it gets over this half of this level, and then think about some maybe long-term bullish interest. But as for now, it does seem a little heavy. Ideally, if we don't want to seek this liquidity here, we're gonna ideally want to see this daily imbalance level. It would be ideal for this level here to get inverted, and instead of using it for rebalance and up movement, we would see it seek downside, which it kind of already did. It already went below the low of the imbalance here. So if we can push down here again and then use it as resistance, then I would be more interested to go on the short side again. But for now, honestly, I wouldn't really touch Bitcoin until this high gets taken out or until this level gives way. Let's look at the Forex Factory and look at the weekly economic calendar for the week coming up, and let's see where our interests are. Monday,